Hi, this is Robert Clinkybeard and David Anderson with the Commercial Landscaper podcast. We're going to take 20 minutes of your life to deliver some amazing business content from accomplished leaders to bring you value, to scale your business, and to better yourself personally. On this show, we have Carlos Del Pozo. He's a co-founder with Team Engine, a text-first software platform. And really what's interesting about this interview is that he takes his military background, his experiences across in Afghanistan, and then applies that to either clients, his team members, just all around dealing with different cultures. So really interesting show and really hopefully you enjoyed. Cheers, everyone. Hi, this is Robert Clinkybeard from the Commercial Landscapers podcast. I am really excited today to be joined by Carlos Del Pozo. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You got it, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, a lot of people struggle with my name, so I'm glad I got that correct.
Yeah, you're not alone for sure.
So Carlos is the co-founder of Team Engine, a text-first software platform which helps companies in industries like landscaping, construction, manufacturing grow and retain their workforces well needed. Team Engine's customer base expanded over 300% in 2021 by helping companies outcompete in a uniquely challenging labor market. Prior to founding Team Engine, Carlos served as an infantry officer in the US Army and grew up in a small family business in San Diego. He currently lives in Boulder, Colorado. So welcome, Carlos.
Thanks, Robert. Excited to be here.
Yeah, now I'm excited. We've obviously talked a couple of times before, so I'm excited that we got together. But to tell us a little bit more about your background, you're obviously coming from another sort of family business. You obviously seems as though you're pretty entrepreneurial.
Yeah, I think it's in my blood. It's in both my nature and my nurture, I guess. But yeah, so my name is Carlos, and I am one of the co-founders of Team Engine, and originally from San Diego, where actually both my parents had small family businesses, both when I was young as well as before. My dad worked in managing resorts, both in the US as well as in Mexico. And then he also ran a landscaping business. And then my mom also started a business. And they, at some point when I was younger, decided just to consolidate and run one business, which turned out to be my mom's business. So I grew up with my play areas being the office floor and with like the board meetings happening at the dinner table.
Right. That's funny.
So that was my upbringing was very much like in the business, and I consider like my family in many ways to be also the folks that were in the business and are still today. So after growing up in San Diego, I went off to college. I went to college on an ROTC scholarship and graduated and became an infantry officer, served in the Army for 4 years, and then went off to business school. Leaving business school, didn't really know what I wanted to do because I'd just been an infantry officer at that point. Knew that I wanted to be entrepreneurial at some point in my life, and came across a model to do that, which was basically going out and raising money to try to acquire an existing business. So I did that for a couple of years, and in the course of doing that, and talking to business owners, looking at businesses, learned a lot about the industries that we serve now, and it sort of influenced the business that we run now, which is Team Engine.
That's awesome. What do you think you learned from the military that you were able to then transfer into your entrepreneurial journey? Because obviously you probably got the bug when you're young, seeing your parents and all their hustle and doing a great job. But what sort of skill sets did you bring from your military service?
Yeah, every day there's something that happens and I see the way that I reacted, or I can match it to an experience that I had in the military. So I think there's just like so many, but probably the number one that has followed me has been an appreciation for empathy and the value of empathy. As a young infantry officer, you are put into charge of 30 plus folks from all different walks of life, across the country, but also potentially internationally. And you have to figure out how to connect to them and how to motivate them, and what motivates them. And to be effective at that requires just, getting rid of a lot of assumptions, and trying to, spend some time in their experience. So you take that, and then when I deployed to Afghanistan, I had to do that, but also with the Afghan army and police and tribal leaders that we worked with.
Oh, wow.
And that was
Okay.
just a whole nother
Wow.
level
Yeah.
of, breaking down your assumptions and trying to really listen and understand. So that's something that's followed me. It's just, the appreciation for how important it is to not make assumptions about what motivates other folks, so that you can actually figure out what those are, which makes you more effective, especially as a leader.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I could have a whole separate conversation regarding your experience over Afghanistan. I'm going to ask you one quick question. I mean,
Sure.
how challenging was? I mean, not to get into any type of political or sort of
Yeah.
military side of things, but there must be some real challenges there where you're dealing with, completely different cultures. Obviously you've got your language here as well. There's a lot of historical
Yeah. Baggage.
baggage. That's good. That's the word I was looking for. So
Yeah.
that must have been a great experience for you, just to be able to obviously first of all understand it and then be able to navigate through it.
Yeah. And it was definitely a big developmental experience. And I think in ways that people often maybe would not assume. And what I mean by that is, I think folks often think about, the Army, and it's this huge organization. It's like the biggest, company you could work for. And they think that it must be very hierarchical and rigid, and in many ways it is. But, my experience on deployment was, I was, as a young lieutenant, the senior American representative in basically a county of Afghanistan, and responsible for leading not just the soldiers there, but also interacting with our counterparts, like I
Right.
described. And I was, really had the ability to figure it out for myself. And so I think that also was a big learning for entrepreneurship, is that there was just a lot of ambiguity. We had our mission, we had our guidance, we knew the commander's intent, but every village was different from the other one. It's almost like a different country when you
Oh,
go a
wow,
couple
wow. And
miles.
how far apart were those villages? I mean, a few
Couple,
miles or?
yeah, a couple of
Oh, wow.
miles.
Okay. Right.
And so you have to like understand each of those individual ones. And so in order to be actually effective, the military did have to be pretty to delegate. And so, the experience that I had was that, I wasn't off there going rogue by any stretch of the imagination, but, minute to minute, there was a lot that I had to figure out on my own with not a lot of information. And so that was definitely also a huge developmental experience, and valuable to being an entrepreneur.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think, just dealing with that, I'm just thinking, mine's racing different directions here, but, dealing
Yeah.
with, employees, you're probably dealing with, on-site employees, but also virtual, you've
Yep.
got all different types of clients out there.
Yeah.
So that experience that you must have gained from, not only your military background, but being in that type of situation,
Yeah.
thousands of miles away, must be huge in helping your business now develop and knowing how to deal with those local challenges you have.
Yeah. And I think it definitely is. It's one of the biggest things I took away from my military experience generally, whether it was on a deployment or my training, which, you're trying to prepare for deployment. And, like I went through Ranger School, which is a very challenging experience. But, one of the things I took away from it is that, one, that people generally, I think, really underestimate what they can do, what they can both tolerate and what they can achieve. But two, for myself, having that learning that of what I could achieve and what I could tolerate was one big takeaway. But I think it's also very challenging in every minute to hold that with you, to remember what kind of experiences you've had and what you've achieved. Overall, I'm better for it, but one thing I do occasionally wish is that I remembered
right.
more clearly those sorts of things, and it would make me, I think, more resilient and stronger in every minute.
That's great. Normally, I'd sort of leave this question towards the end, but I think it's an appropriate time to ask. But I think over the last couple of years in COVID, that people have moved away from the companies that we're working for. I think more business has been started over the last couple of years than ever in history. Yeah. For those young entrepreneurs who have maybe broken away from that corporate environment and trying to start up a business, I mean, what would be the biggest, nuggets that you pass on to them? Because it's pretty challenging out there. It sounds glamorous to be your own business owner, but there's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, if I had to choose a couple, and I'm certainly still on my path myself, but I think getting started is like a big part of the challenge, and I would say that's one of the main things is to just don't spend too much time planning and start executing. I think it's an inclination of a lot of folks, especially if you come from that environment, to be trying to really reduce or mitigate or plan for risk, and it's just a fact that you're not going to really be able to do that. I think there is a lot of value in the exercise of it, but I think one of the things that I've had to learn is to be a little stronger in my bias towards action, and so that's one thing that I would recommend. The second thing I'd recommend is to really, and this is kind of going back to my empathy point, but to really think about the problem that you're trying to solve and the people that you're trying to help, and be really, passionate, especially to start, about the problem and focus your energy there. I think one way that a lot of companies, and especially technology companies, go wrong, in my impression, is that they are a lot of smart people who know they are smart, and they spend a lot of time thinking about a really elegant or sophisticated solution to something, which totally misses an understanding and an empathy for the problem and the people they're trying to help.
Right.
So I would really encourage folks to spend time there. And then probably the third thing that I would say is that it's really important to have a community around you. It can be a very lonely experience.
Yeah.
As I know that you can appreciate, Robert, and the communities that you build. So I think it's really important to not underestimate the value of having folks with you who've either been in your shoes or are in your shoes at the same time, or are just there and can hear you out when you've had a roller coaster day, either up or down, and just have an appreciation for the fact that that's not an evidence of a weakness. That's an evidence of a strength, and that's something that you should draw on.
Yeah, no, that's great. That last one I can really relate to. Actually, I just came out with an article actually a few days ago in Lawn and Landscape talking about the power of networking, which is part of it, but also I used to belong to the Entrepreneurs Organization, and again, you've got all these people who have more likely been in similar situations that business owners go through. So you're not alone, and you'll find that they're all more than happy to share what went well, what didn't go so well. So use the people around you for sure.
And I think that was something that I didn't expect and was new to me, because in the Army, you have this leadership role, but you are you have all these peers with you. Like I was as a brand new lieutenant, there were other lieutenants who started the same time as me, or shortly before, or maybe immediately thereafter. And so you have those folks to build bonds with and to commiserate with. But starting a company, there's no built-in network.
Yeah.
It's just the one that you bring with you or you choose deliberately to develop.
Yeah, for sure. So talk a little bit about Team Engine. What prompted you to start Team Engine?
Yep. So in that experience that I described a little bit or alluded to after I graduated from business school, I went out and started looking for businesses to buy with the intent of becoming the owner and operator of those businesses. And because of my military experience, I sort of looked mostly at companies that had what I felt like had more of a blue collar component to it, more of a field component. And in the experience of talking to those businesses and those owners, I surfaced a universal theme, which was a lot of companies that had a lot of opportunities for growth and were growing pretty much across the board, but could grow even more. And that was evidenced potentially by growing backlogs or other things. But the constraint that held them all back was around people. Some part of the labor capacity, the ability to manage, to retain, all this kind of stuff. And I thought about myself as the operator of that business and what would I do to solve that problem. And I looked at, in particular, at technology options. And when I went looking at technology options, I came up with a lot of stuff, a lot of software that existed, but was built for a different use case. It was built for, a white collar environment. It was built for an accounting company or a software company, and just the context and the use case is fundamentally different. And I really didn't find a good way to get comfortable with how I would manage and mitigate that risk myself. And about the same time, one of my co-founders was transitioning out of day-to-day management of another software company he had previously founded. And something he was doing with his time was he was doing volunteer tax preparation for low-income earners. And so we were sort of in parallel looking at the same problem from two sides. I was talking to the employers and seeing the problem, and he was talking to the employees and the applicants. And we were seeing the same absence of technology or same kind of friction and problems in those industries, and decided that we should go out and try to build a technology solution for those companies.
Cool. And when was that? That was back in what year?
That was, so we founded the company at the beginning of 2018.
Okay.
But I was looking at businesses in like 2016 and 2017 for the most part.
Okay. Cool. And how is it being received? I mean, you've got obviously has some 300% growth in 2021 last year, which is tremendous.
Yeah, no, it was exciting, an exciting year. Starting out, we spent basically the first year just trying, again, going back to my recommendation, just really trying to develop an empathy and an understanding for the problem and the folks who are trying to help. One of our early customers, our first customer actually, is a towing company in Denver. And so, we went down to the yard and hung out in the portable and sat behind the operations manager and sat with the recruiter and just spoke to them and tried to understand their experience and also just observe. So that first year was really spent doing that and also figuring out, is there a business here as well? Can we actually, reach the folks who we want to serve and develop a business model behind it? So that was the first year, was just finding that. And then after that time, then we started, really starting to build the company, hired engineers, hired salespeople, had a good second year. And then coming into the third year, which was 2020, it felt like we had a lot of good momentum and traction, and went into March of 2020 being a great month, the best month ever. And that just turned out to be the first 2 weeks of March 2020.
Yeah.
And then, the last 2 weeks were a little bit of a different experience
Yeah, for sure.
as COVID hit, and, everybody was kind of figuring out what this means. So we didn't know what to expect. We assumed, because of a lot of the value that we provide is around hiring, we assumed that we would be impacted by it, but we didn't really know how. But what we actually saw is that in the short and medium term, we continued growing, and we continued, having folks stick around, hiring. And what we didn't realize, but we, in looking back, we now understand, is that the folks that we serve, in industries like landscaping and construction and manufacturing are essential businesses. So
Right.
those were companies that continued operating, that continued having needs. If anything, in many cases had more needs because they had folks being sidelined by COVID, or they had to apply different, constraints on their operations. For example, they couldn't have as many people on a shift as before, and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then we also, before COVID, we started pushing our solution out of hiring and into more employee engagement, because we saw that a lot of the ways that we added value for hiring were not just relevant to hiring, they were really relevant to just the operations of the company in general. And so one of the things that we did is we included in the software the ability for companies to engage with their existing workforces. And during COVID, that became also a greater challenge in the short term, was communicating with your workforces, trying to communicate changes in policy and PPE availability and expectations, running surveys to see if folks
Right.
had symptoms before they came in, all that kind of stuff. So we had a good solution for a lot of those companies in that moment, which we knew that there was value for us to deliver through that kind of stuff, but we didn't realize, why in the in the immediate context. And then so coming into this year, we've just realized that we've seen that and realized that we do really add a lot of value, and so invested in growth.
That was great. And the example you gave was a great example of, you can do all the planning you want, but
Yes.
when something like that happens in March 2020,
Yep.
it's all around execution, being nimble, trying to figure things out. So, but your increasing engagement with employees must have seen some benefits, like helping with hiring and referrals and things like that. So talk a little bit about that, how your unique hiring process.
Yeah. So one of the things we believe is that the way that a lot of companies think about their people problem, and hiring in particular, is incomplete. We find a lot of folks and a lot of solutions out there really talking about applicant volume as a problem, or the key problem, and or tracking of applicants being a key problem. And we definitely see that being a very common, those being very common problems with companies that we talk to and work with. But we find that they're just typically individual problems that are part of a bigger problem, which is a process problem. It's generally just like an operations problem. Companies that have like the ones that we serve, which are typically a couple dozen or a couple hundred employees, they often lack the resources or the time or the personnel to put that process in place. And the way that we figured this out is that when we started working with companies early on, and we heard a lot of folks saying that we have an applicant problem, we helped them solve that problem. And then we saw that their hiring problem still was not solved, because yeah, they fixed this bottleneck that was, the most obvious and visible one, but they didn't have any way of, engaging with those folks quickly before other folks could. They didn't have any way of making sure to get them in to the office so they converted a resume into a person.
Right.
They just didn't have a way to, actually convert that resume into a hire. And so we saw a lot of folks ending up, what we say is dying on the vine, because they applied, they're interested, they're raising their hand, but then nobody got back to them. And one of the early beliefs that we had coming into this was that there's a lot that you can learn from sales and marketing to apply to hiring and recruiting and retention. And if you had a company that had a lead sign up on the website that was qualified and looked like a good prospective customer, and you didn't reach out to them for 3, 4, 5 days, it's, I think a lot of people kind of know what to expect there, but they think that's, they can do that with applicants, and maybe you could at some point, but you can't now. And I don't think that's going to change. So what we really delivered was a process that includes a lot of best practices and the tools that we know work, and the automation of that process, so that that front desk person or that HR manager or that operations manager at one of these companies who has, is wearing so many hats they can barely walk through the door on any given day, they can focus on the things that they should be spending their time on and let the software, do all the repetitive but super time sensitive tasks that are required to make it a successful process.
No, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely relate. I mean, even back when I had my company in Phoenix, what would it be, 5, 6 years ago, when somebody came into the office looking for a job, you had to be all over that, same day, within hours. And I still hear stories these days with all the, recruitment issues and lack of employees out there, that people take 2, 3, 4 weeks to make decisions. And that's just like, it just crazy to me. So to have that automated process and to allow the frontline staff to be able to work on the fires they're dealing with and have everything automated sounds like a great solution.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, that's the intent.
Cool, awesome. So just wrapping things up here, any other sort of we've got audience all around US, got into Canada, Europe.
Yep.
I mean, is that product available in other countries yet? What's your sort of future look like?
Yeah, so currently we're only operating and available in the United States, but long term, this is a problem that crosses borders for sure. And I think the solution also is crosses borders, or has the potential to also. So it's definitely something that I can see us doing in the long term, is helping out our friends in Canada and elsewhere. We in the short term, however, just the U.S. market is just so large that we can focus here for quite a while before we start looking elsewhere. But that is definitely a longer term opportunity for us.
That's cool. No, awesome. Well, I wish you all the best with your entrepreneurial journey. That's any other parting words for the audience before you jump off?
No, I super appreciate the opportunity to be here. If folks are interested in checking us out, they can type in teamengine.io, and that's our website. And if they want, they can also get a free trial by going to that same website /trial. And then we give folks the opportunity to use the software and kick the tires on it for 7 days to see if it's something that actually is going to be valuable for them.
Cool. And if anybody wants to reach out to you and just hear about more of your story, I mean, is that best through LinkedIn, or what's the best way for them to try and get a hold of you?
LinkedIn's a good way to find me. Carlos Del Pozo, and there's not many of us, I think. There's a few, but I'm the one at Team Engine, and there's only one.
Awesome. Hopefully that was pure dead brilliant for you today. You've got some great takeaways. for your business or for your personal life. This is Robert Clinkenbeard along with David Anderson. I would love to get you and your friends to join us on your journey. If you have any ideas for future speakers, or if you just want to pass this on to friends, family, other business colleagues to sign up and subscribe, that would be awesome. Anyway, thanks everyone, and have a great 2022. Cheers.